And welcome everybody to today's weekly leadership circle, all about humanizing transformation. What do I mean when I say humanizing transformation? It's about bringing humanity back into business and work, and doing that through leveraging tech and data for good. So we really believe in our work using the framework called the Dilyn Way, that there is a missing piece when it comes to transformation, and it's in the work of human identity, in the work of mindset, who we are, not just what we do. And every week what we do is we just throw around a little bit of theory, a little bit of insight that supports humanizing transformation. And today's agenda is all about taking back control. So that's really what I'm talking about today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this, because I think it's funny. I did this with a team of leaders earlier on in the week. Anybody know, just let me know in chat, anybody know what the commonality is between these two numbers, 8.25 and 9? It's a little bit of a clue. Believe it or not, 9 seconds apparently is the attention span of a goldfish. And in this crazy world that we're living in, whether you believe it or not, 8.25 seconds, which is less than the attention span of a goldfish, is apparently the human attention span. So I'm not too sure whether that is a kosher statistic or not, but I love it as a little bit of an opener when we're talking about attention management. So really, really interesting. So just to introduce today's leadership circle subject, what I want to do is I'm just going to kind of like fire my way through a couple of quotes, because I always start with some quotes. It's nice for credibility. It's nice for grounding us in. And here's a really important quote, which I think is from a blog in LinkedIn, and I do have the link. I don't know why the reference isn't in this slide, but it usually is. But it's about this sense of, you know, we find that with technology and smartphones and tablets that they are increasing our absent-mindedness. I don't think anybody's going to be arguing with that. They reduce our ability to think and remember. That's something that is really important for us to understand. They also affect our ability to pay attention to things and our ability to regulate emotion. That's really important. That's something to take away and reflect on. And I don't know about you, but even the possibility of a message or a call, something happening out there, especially if I've got a campaign happening on social media, oh my goodness, if I think that something's happened on LinkedIn, do I want to go and have a look? Even though I'm working on some really important focused work from a business perspective, I will tend to go there. So I think, you know, that hands up, who's guilty of that? I mean, what can I say? So there is this real kind of sense of distractions all over the place for us, isn't there? And this is all called a thing. I don't know how many of you have actually heard of the phrase content shock, but it is a thing. It's a thing out there. And content shock essentially is the number of channels that are out there that are feeding us, or that we can go out to feed on, and also the sheer amount of data that's out there that is increasing. 2.5 quintillion bytes of data every day just coming at us left, right and center. So, you know, really, really, really important thing for us to understand. And what happens when we get this content shock is this. And I don't know whether you've ever felt one of these, but I sure have. And thinking about our teams in the world of transformation and our users, because essentially we're giving users a little bit of content shock because we're introducing them to new potential channels through technology, to new information through data. We are triggering some of these things here, and I'm sure there's loads more in there that we can that we can come across. So there's a huge amount of distraction. There is a huge amount of complexity out in the world that we're living in, and all of this can exacerbate our emotional and cognitive state as human beings, which lowers performance, which increases distraction, etc., etc. So there's a lot going on here. And a relatively recent study from the NICM Health Research Institute has actually said that, you know, looking at some of the things about memory, looking at the impact of this long term on our performance is quite interesting. And they even have done some research on executive function, as you can see there, our ability to deal with cognitive tasks. So we might think we can get away with it, we might think we can manage it, but you know, it's physically doing something to our brains and our neural pathways. Ooh, take a breath. All of that stuff. So bringing that into context, what I want to do is just share with you what we talk about when we're talking with leaders and when we're talking with change teams, is just to think about 3 macro drivers of change that we're trying to manage. And this is some of the stuff that we're trying to navigate through our lives and our transformation. The pace of things is increasing. So we talk a lot about that, and we break that down. A sense of inevitability. Whether we like it or not, modernization is happening. Technologies that might be on premise are coming to end of life, legacy systems, we're updating them, everybody's going to cloud, we're talking about hybrid. There's inevitability of change as well that's happening. And also convergence. And convergence is a really important one for us in our work in humanizing transformation, because convergence hints at human. So the meaning of convergence for us is we've been in this world of the Industrial Revolution 4.0 for a couple of decades now. And we're familiar with it because it's all about productivity. It's all about efficiency. It's all about automation, getting things done, you know, in a faster and in a better way. Yet, you know, becoming masters of what we do. But alongside that now, as we're ebbing through that, even though a lot of our transformations are still focused on IR4, we've got the Industrial Revolution 5.0. And if you go to World Economic Forum, you can see quite a bit on the 5th Industrial Revolution. What does that mean? It's about humanity. It's about how we become more human in the idea of business and work. So it's instead of the machines coming in to take over, it's about how do we create a relationship between us and machine. So it's more about mastering who we are. So the convergence bit for us is how do we balance mastering what we do, as well as starting to bring the concept of who we are and our identity into change and transformation, aka humanizing transformation. So all of this is happening. And those 3 macro drivers and all of that complexity means what? It means that more often than not, we individually and our teams are incredibly obsessed with time. So obsessed with time that we have lost our mastery of it and we have become slaves to it. If you think about your narrative during a normal day, I wonder how many times you say, look, I wonder how many times you say, how long are we going to spend on this? And when are we going to have that meeting? And how long does that meeting need to be? And this piece of work needs to take how long? This project, how long is it going to be? This particular sprint, is it really neat? Are we going to be able to do this 2 weeks every sprint? And all of a sudden, our narrative is so incredibly obsessed with time that we've lost the mastery of it. And that's what we want to do. And that's what we want to talk about today. So how do we become masters of time is really to introduce this new concept of attention management. Now, I just want to give everybody a little bit of a red herring. A lot of people think that time management is out because it's old, and the new kid off the block is attention management and it's in. But that's not the case. Attention management, the ability for us to increase our focus and our attention and reduce our distractions, actually allows us to better manage our time. So that's what's really important about that. So it's not a rip and replace. It's not an either or. I think what's really important is for us to recognize that it's about how do we increase our attention management and therefore to balance out our time management. Super important. So I promised that I would share with everybody the model that we use within the framework to help individuals, ourselves, as role model modern leaders and practitioners, to increase our attention management and also to look at what that might look like with teams, hopefully, if we've got some time today. But before I do that, I just want to share with everybody something that is quite important, which is an understanding that we have 3 brain states. We have a brain state which is distraction, a brain state that is focus, and a brain state which is daydreaming. So we have 3 brain states. And at any given moment, we will be in one of them. We cannot be in two at one time. We can only be in one of these three brain states. And equally important is the fact that we can only have one thought at one particular time. So if you remember that slide that I showed earlier on, if we are in overwhelm, fear, freeze, what that means is we're stuck. So we're in distraction. We are unable to focus. So it's really important for us to start kind of thinking about reflecting and starting to become a little bit more consciously aware in our daily life of when we're in distraction, when we're in daydreaming, when we're in focus, and thinking about that idea of what exactly am I thinking about at the moment? Is it the right thing? And also, distraction isn't a bad thing, and neither is daydreaming. You know, distraction is something that's really good. If you're doing big creative work or deep work, taking yourself away for 5 or 10 minutes to go for a walk around the block, to take you away, completely distract yourself from that deep work and then coming back to it. There's myriads of research out there that will tell you that that is so incredibly important to increase and to maintain that sense of focus. So distraction isn't always a bad thing. Neither is daydreaming. How many of us have daydreamed a brilliant idea and then you come into the kind of reality and you go, no, that's not going to work. What you're doing is you're moving from one brain state into the other. But daydreaming gives us a wealth of value and a real sense of potentiality of the future. So daydreaming is really good for us. So I just want to share that with everybody before I talk to us about this model. So the model that I want to introduce to everybody today, and it's only just this is flavors, right? You know, we're in a leadership circle, we've got 45 minutes. I won't be able to get right down into the nitty-gritty of it. So hopefully I can provoke and nudge everybody today with at least one thing that they can take away with. But it's what we call the PET model. And the PET model for us allows us to increase our attention management so that we can better master time. So what do I mean by PET? Well, P stands for priority. E stands for energy and emotion. And T stands for trigger. PET model. So it's not my little four-legged furry friend around the corner. It is indeed a model that we can use to help us humanize transformation in our own practice and also in the design and delivery of projects and programs for helping our users and our systems. Priority, energy, and triggers. So I'm going to give you the flavors for what this might mean today. And some of this I'm sure you will all know. And I say this a lot to people. Humanizing transformation is not rocket science, but it's just bringing the reality. It's just getting, the logic out there into conversation. Priority. What do I mean by priority? Well, in this particular instance, what I mean is the prioritization of why we do things. So genuine purpose, and then how the techniques we use to prioritize things. So there's two things there. There is the understanding of why we're doing something and the ability to use techniques to prioritize. That's really important. So just very quickly going to go through two of them. Our purpose, we have two key things that we look at. The first one is you yourself. And genuinely, for me to ask you the question, have you clarified your moonshot? You might know what you want to do for the next job, or you might know what you want to do for the next promotion, but have you really worked on your moonshot, your overarching purpose for being in your profession or in your sector? What is the legacy that you want to leave? What is the real kind of value, the humanity piece that you want to bring in? How much work have you done on that? And how clear is that? And secondly, is that sense of in your daily practice, the decisions that you're making. And you may have heard the 5 why. Some people call it 3 why. I call it 5 why. It's basically getting to root cause of why you're doing something. And habitual practice of asking why 5 times in our decision making before we go headlong into a task without thinking about it or saying yes to the manager, whatever is a really important thing for us to do. So really practicing habitually asking ourselves the 5 whys to get to root cause is important, because that gets us to the why of the task, the why of the decision making. So there's a macro view here and a micro view, isn't there? So that's a little bit about priority in terms of purpose. But then it's how do you prioritize? So very, very quickly, I'll take you through a few things here. So how many people have tried the Eisenhower matrix? Really, really, really simple. It allows you to prioritize the stuff that you are working on. What you do, what you schedule, what you delegate, and what you delete. Now, Eisenhower, obviously, one of the most famous American presidents, created this model, and this is how he worked, arguably one of the most effective presidents of our time in terms of innovation. Now, that was a long time ago. There's a little bit of a nuance here for us in terms of modernity that we need to think about as well. Is it do, schedule, delete, and delegate, and automate? So we can bring automation in here in our own practice as well as in the practice of others. So that's the Eisenhower matrix. Really simple. We work with teams to do it. Really great. Very, very, very cool for us to use on our own practice. There is also what's called the impact urgency exercise. This one is something that we work with with teams. So if you're working in a PMO, if you've got a team around you that you're working with, the impact urgency exercise is a brilliant exercise to do. And just let me know in chat if you have had a go at this, but it's excellent. Basically what it does, it's an exercise and it's a play, it's a serious play exercise. And what you do is you start off with just the two axes. So the impact axes and the urgency axes. You just start with those two. And then what you get the team to do is literally just put there with Post-its, digitally or physically, put all of their tasks and everything that they're working on in the box between the vertical impact and the horizontal urgency. Put them all in there. Then what you do is after the fact, you then put the two curves in so that you can cover off 3 zones. What we must do, what is nice to have, and the stuff that we won't do. And that can create a good conversation, courageous conversations. Not everybody's going to like what happens when you get into the won't do right area. And then something magic happens. Then what you do is you look at your stakeholder request list. All of the things that the business and the system is asking of you, or maybe the leaders, and choose a different color and put them in. And then share with the stakeholders so they can actually start seeing. This is a great way of building transparency around, helping our teams and the system understand prioritization when it comes to, humanizing our own projects and programs. If we're courageous, one of the things that we can do is instead of the team putting the Post-its of stakeholder requests in, you can get your stakeholders into the meeting. We work a lot with local authority, and if you think about local authorities, especially here in the UK, sometimes we can be working as central teams, whether it's OD, change, transformation, digital, technology, or whatever, on hundreds of services at a time. Just think of all of those requests that are coming in left, right, and centre. Distraction, right? Overwhelm. So thinking about how we can bring those stakeholders into these workshops and conversations to do the impact urgency exercise, super cool. So think about how you might be able to play with that one. The next one is then once we've prioritized, it's then how do we map that into the calendar? And those of you that haven't come across the Pomodoro technique, it's great because it speaks to lean, it speaks to agile, it speaks to our work in the Dilyn way, which is the power of one, all about small. And it's all about really just putting yourself into a situation where you are blocking out small amounts of time to do tasks and then taking short breaks. So if you haven't gone and had a look at the Pomodoro technique, go and have a look at it. Today's session isn't about this, but I'm just sharing it with you because it's a damn good thing for us to help when we're looking at prioritizing the how of our work. There's more. There's loads of things out there. You might have things that you're working on. There's the RICE model, the Moscow model, the Kano model. There's loads of things out there. But those that I've just shared with you are things that you might want to just go into. So prioritization is about purpose, and then how we prioritize our work individually as well as teams. Then we get into the world that I love, which is the world of energy. Has anybody ever heard of lark, third bird, or owl? Ever heard of it? Yeah, I've got a few nanas and I've got a few yayas. So these are chronotypes, and oh boy, is this really good for us to understand ourselves and to work on with teams and to observe and to discuss with our users, because this can help us with the prioritization of when we deliver change, to help boost attention with our users as well. So these are what we call chronotypes, and it's basically biorhythms. So it's when we're at our most energetic. I used to be a lark, and I took about 2 years to I used to be an owl, and I took about 2 years to systematically change myself to a lark. And basically that means is my peak energy point of the day is right in the morning. So that's probably why you're all getting a lot of me today energetically. If it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I wonder if it would be something a little bit different. But the lark is where peak energy is in the morning. The third bird is where peak energy is around about the 2 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And the owl is where you peak at night. Just a little bit of a caveat for those of you that peak at evening night. If you think that your best time is between 10 o'clock and 12 o'clock, and you feel that you get this rush of energy, and it's when you do your work because maybe the kids have gone to bed and it's quiet and there's no, your team are not emailing you or whatever, it's a little bit of a false positive, because it feels positive because you've got energy in the hours between 10 and 12. But the real reason that our human body increases energy at that time is because of cellular regeneration. So the true owl really should have their peak around about between 6 and 8. If you think that you're peaking between 10 and 12, I would just question that, because that is the time that our human body is at its peak for cellular regeneration. And if we're using cognitive energy during that time, then we might be reducing our immune system. Just something for us to think about. So once we know where our chronotype is, once we know where our team's collective chronotype is, and even discussing it with users, then we can understand where peak time is and where trough time is, which is the low times, to avoid it. And the other thing that we can do is start putting in recovery times. And it's a really great little thing to do. What I've got in here on slides is just to show you some of the things, some of the tasks that we might want to really start mapping out vis-a-vis lark, third bird and owl, when we might be best to do things to increase our productivity and to ensure that our focus is at its most optimal. But you know what? There's no point talking about energy without talking about emotion, because as I showed you right at the very top, whatever we are doing leads to emotion. Thought leads to emotion. Our emotions lead to thoughts. It's such a complicated system. And I think how we feel is really, really important. So recognizing how we feel, getting social with our team about how we're feeling. We do an energy check-in with all of our teams, and when we work with customers, we encourage energy check-ins at the beginning of most meetings, if not all. Very, very simple thing to do, but it really is powerful. Really, really is powerful. I'm just going to stop. Janet, you've just put your hand up for a question.
Where does the wheel of emotion come from if I wanted to use that?
I have got a link for the wheel of emotion, Janet, and I will share it with everybody in the email this afternoon with the video recording of the session, if you like. It's brilliant. So it takes you through how to know more about it, and I'll give you all of the links for it.
Thank you very much. I just want to be, if I did use it in a presentation or in a piece of work that I'm doing, I want to be able to reference it properly.
Yep,
Thank you very much.
So we've got all of that, Janet, no problem at all. The good thing about it, no worries, is that if you recognize that you're feeling, a certain emotion, happy, angry, whatever, what the wheel of emotion allows you to do is it allows you to start breaking it down and getting to root cause. And again, critical thinking is all about getting to root cause. And with our emotions, it's really important, especially around change and transformation. If we want to humanize it, talking about how we feel with users is a really, really powerful thing. But can we break it down? Can we get it to root cause? Of course we can. So we can use something like that to do that. So definitely giving the references for that. Managing and controlling and increasing our energy is incredibly important. Simplifying and optimizing our conditions and environment is part of attention management. You will be able to go onto any web browser, look at the work of Maura Thomas, look at the work of Adam Grant, and they will all talk to you about, so many different wonderful techniques to optimize and simplify your conditions and your environment. Things like sleep hygiene, things like, not multitasking, only having one device on open at a time, closing down your apps, all of that kind of stuff. It's all there in the open for you. It's really important that you go out and have a look at it. Our care and well-being, I think that's what I've alluded to in energy and emotion, is so important. And in our framework, we have something called the 4 Ps that we work with every individual on, which is purpose, profile, presence, and a sense of being prepared. Those 4 Ps allow us to increase our attention management. And you can also, break your energy and your emotion into an internal state and an external state as well, if you want. So this is another little technique that you can use. So internally, where am I mentally? Internally, where am I kind of physically? Internally, where am I from a purpose and a spiritual and a soul perspective? My values, how is that being fed? So internal. And then you've got the external pieces as well, which is a little bit easier to work on with teams. But when you've got a level of trust, you can also work on the internal things as well with your teams. Super, super cool. The final thing I just want to share with everybody today is triggers. So we've got prioritization, which is purpose and how we prioritize once we understand that purpose to remind ourselves. We've got energy, thinking about our energy, thinking about the energy of others, thinking about our emotion. And then we've got triggers. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the work of Carol Dweck, which is all about growth mindset. But a lot of the time people will talk about, are you a growth mindset or are you a fixed mindset? Oh, John over there, he's really negative in meetings. He's definitely fixed mindset. Well, that's wrong. Fixed mindset and growth mindset are just 2 ends of a spectrum. What we should be focusing and thinking about is what triggered John into a fixed mindset. What triggers me into a positive mindset? So it's the triggers that we should be thinking about, not necessarily labeling somebody or ourselves either fixed or growth, thinking about the triggers. And if we start focusing on triggers, what we do is we start raising our consciousness around attention, focus, attention management. Really, really important. So the performance triggers that we use are, when am I triggered? Who triggers me? Why is it every time we have a meeting and that particular person is in the meeting, the energy in the meeting is different? Why is it that when I have a conversation with that person, I feel really frustrated? Why is it when I have a conversation with that person, I feel really energized about everything? Yeah, who triggers you one way or the other? When are you triggered? Physically, how do you feel differently? Hybrid working, you're at home, you're on your own. You're in shed quarters like me, or I'm inside and there's people around me. When am I triggered? When and where am I triggered? And the other thing as well, which I think is really important, is what triggers us. And sometimes we forget that, physical objects can trigger us as well. So thinking about physical objects, there might be just something that's distracting us because it's there, get rid of it. And when we go through those four W's, what that means is we can start going back to priority and we can start talking about purpose and why, start getting into the 5 whys, the root cause of the trigger, so that we can either increase it if it's taking us into positive, or get rid of it and manage it out if it's in the negative. So thinking about our triggers is super important. Ways to manage and control our triggers. I hope everybody's keeping up with me, because I told you it was a smorgasbord. It's a flavors today. We're not going deep into one thing. I'm throwing it at us today, this Wednesday, which is kind of, a little bit different, but I like it sometimes. So triggers to manage and control our sense of moving across that spectrum between fixed and growth. Observation. How much time do we spend observing ourselves and others in terms of these triggers? Journaling. Anyone that becomes familiar with our work will tell you that journaling is an incredibly important thing. And you know what? Journaling can just mean one word. One word a day is enough to journal. It's a reflection on how did I do, or an intention on how am I going to be today. So journaling is a really important thing. If you would like to know more about journaling, DM me, because we do a lot of work on journaling with leaders and transformation teams. And the other thing is just simply just creating a trigger map. Hey, just open Mural or, you know, Google Whiteboard or something like that, and just sitting there and giving yourself permission for 10 minutes. Just think about your triggers. You know, when are you at your best? When are you at your worst? When are you in flow? When are you most purposeful? Just give yourself a little bit of time. And serious play, do it with your teams, do it with a colleague. And this stuff is really, really important stuff when it comes to us being able to, you know, increase our attention management, and, believe it or not, be able to become masters of time. Now, I also want to talk about teams. Every single thing that I've just mentioned to you in that lovely little flavors of thought around attention management is predominantly driven to focus on you and, you know, and you yourself. But it's all applicable to teams. However, if any of you are managers of teams, leaders of teams, what we do, how we do it, when we do it, the untapped potential power we have to affect our team's attention is super, super important for us to understand. I've just come off a session with a group of practitioners, and we've literally gone into the real detail of this particular element, and it's really, you know, it's just blown people away in terms of really understanding it. And I love this quote, because this quote comes from The Attention Economy of Tom and John. And that, you know, if you start talking about something like an impending cost-cutting initiative, whatever it is, you don't realize how much that might be an attention cue to shift the focus of your team. Now, this is a paradox. This is a really hard paradox that we as leaders and managers need to think about. Because the world that we're in is all about be open and transparent, right? So we are moving towards being more open, sharing everything, working out aloud, working in the open, making sure that we're sharing everything that we know so that everything is out there. And that's absolutely right. But when do we share it? How do we share it? What are we sharing is really important too. So if we think that we've just come out of a meeting and, you know, the leadership team have just said to us, right, you know what's happening? We're going to go into a restructure in 6 months' time. We might think, gosh, I'm a transparent, open leader and authentic. I'm going to go and tell my team about that. But the first thing that we need to think about perhaps is, what are my team focusing on at the moment? And is it the right time to be doing that? So not saying not do it, but just being a little bit conscious of the latent power that we have to affect these attention cues at a team level, and super important when we're thinking about communication of transformation to users as well. It's a really, really interesting thought, this paradox, and you know, something quite important for us to get our head around. Just finally, all I want to do with everybody today is to just quickly share with you how the PET model might be a little bit more focused in on your teams or your users. So in terms of prioritization, if you haven't got a shared purpose, not vision, purpose for the work that you're doing as a team, then I think you should do it. A vision and a strategy are language that connect to structure. They're intangible to a human being. But if you can reposition vision and strategy into purpose, into why we are doing this, you're connecting to human. So shared purpose is really important to help teams prioritize. And the other thing is, don't put it in a drawer, digital or physical, to gather dust. You want to make sure that that shared purpose is top of line, even if it's on a slide or you introduce it at the top of every meeting. Get that shared purpose repeated and consistently visible in the narrative and in the work and practice of your team. Super important. Consideration of moving into an OKR model, so objective key results. If you haven't already, that's something that is a really important thing that we certainly work on. If you'd like to know more about OKRs, let me know, because I'd love to talk to you more about that.
Mel, what could you repeat what OKR stands for, please?
Yeah, objective key result. Objective key results. There's a great video, Janet, that is by a guy called Vishen Lakhiani, and he's the CEO of an organization called Mind Valley. It's a public video and it's about an hour long. It is the best explanation of how you transition into an OKR way of working for either you as an individual or as a team or as an organization. Absolutely brilliant. So if you like, what I'll do is I'll share that video as well when I email the replay to everybody later on today. And the final one that I want to talk about in terms of prioritization, and this is a big one for each and every one of us: analysis paralysis. Analysis paralysis. Bit of jargon there, Mel. But I love it. What do I mean by that? I don't know about you, but how many times have you gone to seek and search information about something and gone down the rabbit hole? OMG. Just, you know, analysis paralysis. There is so much info out there. When do you press the stop button? And we've got to think about this with our teams as well when we're in discovery and stuff like that, right? How do we know when it's right to stop? So we need to give ourselves, you know, a stop agreement, a deadline agreement when it comes to discovery and information. You know, give yourself that. Or another thing that I do, which is a great little hack, is create a hypothesis and then go into your analysis and into your searching. And when you've got that hypothesis, it keeps you focused on attention. It's really, really cool. So
Mel, I would have said that the internet could validate any hypothesis you could come up with. I could say that the election in America was stolen, and I would find plenty of material to support that online. It doesn't actually mean that that's the right thing.
Oh, I love it. That's absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And there's something that you need to do over and above that, which is asking yourself, and this is one of our affirmations: how many right answers are there? How many right answers are there to this? And then you're ready to go. So you're absolutely right. It is like the internet is there for confirmation bias without a question. So thinking about that hypothesis and going into that search, but what you're searching on is how many right answers. What that hypothesis needs to be critically, you go back to it. A hypothesis is something that needs to be critically analyzed as well. How many right answers could there be for this? Energetically, we've got a few things that we can do. Deep work. I don't know how many of you work in the area of deep work, but deep work is really important for teams, allowing teams the permission to go into deep work. Atlassian are a great example of deep work. They have what's called a get bleep work done days. And basically it's a day where the rest of the organization understand that they're in deep work, so they will not be answering emails, or they will not be actively connected. It's a little bit like out of office, but it's for deep work. Google arguably take it one step further, and what they do is they cut themselves off from the team as well to go into deep work. So it's about thinking about what are we doing here around deep work? What are our boundaries around deep work? Management and accountability. Transparency and community. Transparency and community is a really interesting one at a team level. I love working with teams to create an attention management manifesto. So a focused work attention management manifesto. So what are our agreements around how we communicate with others? As an example, it can be as simple as this. On email, as a team, we agree that we will always answer our emails within 3 minutes. In an informal chat environment, if we're working on, Outlook, if you're formal email through Outlook, we'll respond to each other in 3 hours perhaps. But if you're in a Teams environment and you're in formal chat, what are your agreed communication methods? So it's just starting to think about your attention management manifesto, and you can do that. It's really, really easy for you to sit down with your team and just think about that. And finally, the power of one, which is a key approach to us in our framework. And the power of one is about breaking it down. Breaking it down. So super important. You know, thinking about your, you know, if you're line managing, or if you've got a list of tasks at team level, look at your list of tasks and think about how they're phrased, and think about how they're broken down. You know, somebody might have a task that says launch new product, because that's what I'm working on. That's my prioritization list, launch new product. Or break that down, reframe it into, you know, what, you know, prioritizing what needs to happen in week 1 for launch. That's just a reframe, but it's a mental hack. So really starting to look at our lists of priorities and breaking them down, and helping people to break down their projects as well. Triggers at a team level are quite important for us. Most important one is a language. What we say and how we say it. You know, it's not yes but, it's yes and. So the triggers for us as managers, as leaders, you know, the language that we use is really, really important. Think about the language that we use is so important. Consistency and repeatability of messages. We think that because we've said it, everybody's heard it, and then we can't understand why it's being ignored. It's not being ignored. There's a wonderful saying which says, when you grow tired of saying something, it's when the world has heard it for the first time. It's so important for us to just spend a wee bit of effort on repetition and consistency when it comes to messaging. And that is a really healthy trigger. And the final trigger is what we call working around focus. And working around focus is a really important thing. And there's a great example of this with an organization, an international organization. And the international organization basically opened a new office in Asia Pac, headquarters in the UK. What they were finding was that the performance in Asia Pac just wasn't shifting. There was no growth happening in the Asia Pac office. And they were thinking, what do we do? So as a leadership team, the CEO and the leadership team were like, we've got to do something about our performance here, and our growth, and our, you know, our numbers are just not changing. They're not increasing in Asia Pac. And what they recognized was, through observation, is that when they were coming together as teams, there was a cultural nuance to keep everything European, because the headquarters was out of the UK. So everything was European focus. So they weren't actually really connecting with the Asia Pac team. Now, this is what's really important. The Asia Pac team needed to focus on their work. The UK team still needed to focus on their work. So everybody's focus and attention was still relevant. So what do the leadership team? They don't want to distract people from their focused attention work, their priorities. So what did the leadership team do? Something quite sublime. The CEO temporarily moved his office to Asia Pac. So he physically moved himself to Asia Pac. And then the second thing they did was, when they came together at meetings, they alternated time zone, and they alternated who drove the meetings between Asia Pac and HQ. They didn't affect the work or the prioritization that each region was working on. They worked around the performance issue and created an innovative workaround, and it shifted behavior, and performance in Asia Pac went up. And after a wee while, CEO could go back to the UK, something to keep monitoring. That's a lovely little story about working around the focus. Super, super important. How does everybody feel? What a smorgasbord of flavors of attention management and things that we can think about for ourselves, and also think about for our teams. Everything that I've talked about today is about humanizing transformation, little techniques for how we can think about more about who we are rather than what we do. And of course, it's all part of the Practitioner Leadership Academy that we have in our community, and that's the professional certification in humanizing transformation that is available for anybody that is in the practice of transformation, whether that's OD, projects and programs, change, technology, etc. So The professional certification in humanizing transformation is available for you to understand more. We're in our autumn season, so we just launched on Monday our new updated program. So if you'd like to know more about that, what I've got in the chat is a little link there that allows you to head into a strategy session. So if you want to spend you know, a completely you and me confidential session on who you are, what the hell did you talk about today, Mel? How does it fit into a bigger picture? If you want to talk about your own now future mapping, then more than happy. It's what I do. We work on purpose, not profit. So if you'd like to spend an hour with me just to think about something that I've said today that you would like to look at a little bit more or wider, then please take advantage of that. I would encourage you to do that. And the one thing I wanted to share with everybody today really briefly is forget about hackathons. What about Hacklist? So in the chat, if you would like me to send you a little bit of a list, which is just a simple worksheet, and it's got about 30 or 40 tiny little practices that you can use with your team or in your own daily life that you can have a go at, think about, then it's a little worksheet, it's a little exercise. It only probably takes about 20 minutes for you to do, but we call it the Hacker List for attention management and management of time. So pop it into chat, just say yes or why or okay or whatever in chat, and I'll send that over to you. It's a great little exercise. We do it with our customers, and it's just something really, really nice for you to have a look at, and there might be some golden nuggets in there for you in terms of practices. I never ever finish one of these sessions without sharing a little bit of a banana skin. And actually, I have to say, I'm going to go back to Janet's comment on me talking about the hypothesis, because that was a banana skin in its own right. You're absolutely right to raise that, Janet, and thank you for that. We do have to be careful of confirmation bias. And the way to get over confirmation bias is to ask how many right answers there are. But there are also two general banana skins that we don't want to slip up on when it comes to attention management. Number one, underestimating the importance of priority, energy, and triggers. Underestimating the importance of it can really make us slip up. And the other thing is overestimating ourselves, overestimating our own capability when it comes to managing and controlling time. It's quite interesting because I think a lot of us think, oh, you know, don't worry about it. I can manage this. But actually, I don't know about you, even when I'm doing deep focus work to, you know, and I can often think, oh my God, I just need to just put something on the grocery list. I've just distracted myself from my deep focus work. You know, I overestimate myself as well. So, you know, we've all got to remember that we're human. So think about those banana skins, that underestimating the importance of attention management and the overestimation of our own capability. Let's be kind to ourselves and give ourselves permission. And that brings us to the end of today's session. It's one of my lightning round weekly moments. Usually we go a little bit slower. We talk about something a little bit more deeply, but today was something a little bit different, allowing us to really go wide on that subject of attention management. I think, you know, what is important for us to take away today is that time management is not irrelevant anymore. It's as relevant as it ever has been, but it's about managing and balancing, harmonizing our attention and focus with the management of time is what we ought to be focusing on, and thinking about that PET model, thinking about prioritization, thinking about energy and emotion, thinking about triggers, as opposed to whether you're in a negative or positive state, a fixed or a growth mindset. I want to say thank you to everybody, each and every one of you today, for hanging in there with me, for sticking around. I am going to stop the record button now. I'm going to stick around for another 10 minutes. If anybody would like to ask any questions, just, you know, share a story that they might have themselves, or even a challenge that you've got that you would like to just, you know, talk about in terms of attention management or the wider the wider framework, the Dilyn Way, then please stick around, and I will be here for the next 10 minutes. Otherwise, I bid you adieu and have a fantastic day. Think about the PET model.